Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vet Chats, where we help veterans share their awesome stories and make the veteran community a better place for all. I hope you'll stay tuned to see how this generation of veterans are continuing their service. Also, Vet Chats is now available on Race Across America Radio. We'll be played Mondays at 9 p.m. and Saturdays at 3 p.m. They have a lot of great veteran content that I know you guys will like, so be sure to check them out. You can check them out at the iHeartRadio, the Odyssey app, or their website, raceacrossamerica.org. So I hope everyone had a great weekend. Hi. I had a pretty good weekend. Again, I didn't really do much, but that's okay because the sun came out today and spring is for sure around the corner this time. So I'm excited. All right, so tonight we have a great guest, David Scott. He's an author. He's served in the Marine Corps and the Army. So we're going to have a lot to talk about tonight. So let's get him on. All right. Dave, how you doing?
Good. Hey, Jenna, how are you?
I'm doing great. How was your weekend?
Good.
Nice. How's the weather where you're at?
It's a little cold right now. Yeah, it's a little bit cold, so it's starting to warm up though.
That's good. It gives you hopes that there's sunshine around the corner. Zach Bailey said, we're getting a restraining order against winter next year. Yes, I agree. Let's do that.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll sign on that wherever you need me to. All right. So, Dave, let's get started. Let's get into it. Let's go back to the beginning of your service. So where are you originally from, and how did you end up joining the Marine Corps?
All right. So when I joined the Marine Corps, I lived in New Jersey. Do not recommend this state to anybody. It's kind of the armpit of America, but no, it was actually a really fun place. But I was in New Jersey, and initially I wanted to join the Army. And so I had decided, like everybody does, that I was going to be special forces, I was going to be amazing, and, just go do all of this. Well, the problem was the Army recruiter wouldn't give me the time of day. He would tell me, oh, yeah, I'm going to meet you somewhere, I'm going to show up, we're going to do whatever. And, nothing. But the Marine recruiter was following me around. Like, I could not get rid of this guy. He would show up, like, I worked at a restaurant. He would show up into, like, the kitchen of my restaurant and be like, yo, dude, you got to come down and join the Marines? Like, what's up? And so finally, like, I came down, and I'm like, all right, what's going on? Like, tell me about the Marines. He gives me the whole sales pitch, and I mean, anybody that's ever been around a Marine has probably heard the sales pitch. And the greatest and the best in the world and all.
The uniforms.
Yes, the uniforms, everything, the honor, the history, and so I was like, listen, if I'm doing this, I want to go infantry, and then I want to, do all this. Well, I got infantry, and then I got more than one
part. Oh no.
Yeah.
So how did you like your first go around? You ended up doing a few deployments, right?
Yeah, so I did 4 deployments with the Marines, so 4 deployments in 4 years. The last one ended in 2006, and that was rough. So
yeah,
I played my part in the Marines, but it was rough, and it was a lot of it was hard on me. It was a grind. It was a grind because I was one of those guys that would always like want to make things better, or like, why don't we do things like this? Why don't we do things like that? I was the guy that like everybody's sergeant hated, and like, just knock it off, like sit down, shut up, and like just do things the way that, like, things that later on in my career that I told to people, like, just accept things the way that they are for right now, lowest common denominator. But yeah, so that was really, really hard for me because like I could see better ways of doing things, and it just that wasn't the way that it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like we've been doing this. It's just gonna make it
Hmm.
harder if we do it your way, even though in the long run it'd probably pay off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's frustrating. So you did 4 and you were like, I'm out.
Yep.
Did you have big plans when you got out?
I had no plans. And so I knew that I didn't, well, I thought maybe I might want to go to college. So I tried to do like a semester, but I dropped out after like a semester. I bounced around from job to job for a little while before I landed at the Internal Revenue Service. And that was an interesting job, but it gave me time to like start doing audiobooks. Like I really fell in love with audiobooks because it was clerical work, and so it was completely mindless. I could go there, I could plug in my audiobooks, and it was amazing because I love to read. And with the Marines and deployments, ironically enough, I didn't get a lot of time to be, reading and stuff. And so this really lent itself to me being able to read a lot more, which kind of reignited my love of literature. And so that was one of the things that was really, really good for me.
Yeah. So when you're doing audiobooks, what was kind of like your first one or one that really stood out to you?
Um, so one of the first ones that I listened to was by Michael Duran. It was Night Stalkers, and so it was the history of the 160th Special Operations Helicopter Aviation, and just so you would be familiar with them from like Black Hawk Down. Michael Duran is the guy that got captured in Black Hawk Down, and so that was the 160th that was giving them rides in, and but he gave like the whole origin story about how they started initially when they were trying to rescue hostages in Iran, and then they decided that, okay, we need a better option here. We need a special forces option that's dedicated to flying helicopters. And so like after like some extremely sketchy like E3, E4 kind of like welding tanks to helicopters and stuff like this, they started developing all of these capabilities. So it was a fascinating book, got me into the audiobooks, but then I kind of dove off into like the fantasy thriller genres, and that's
Okay.
mostly what I read on my spare time.
So when you were reading these, did you ever think, I could do this?
When I was reading them, no, but when I started looking into stuff, I started looking into the requirements. So fast forward on the IRS, and I got really, really tired of a lot of like the federal government nonsense. So the clincher for me was I was trying to like process some reports, and for what like I could not figure out like why none of the examiners had these reports going. And so like I started going around to them, hey, like why aren't these reports printed? I need these reports to get them. Oh well, there's a problem with the printer. I can't print the device. Okay, can you show me the error? Like what's going on? Well, it won't print. Well, why won't it print? It won't print because there's no paper in the printer. Now, Jenna, there's literally a pallet with like boxes and boxes and boxes of paper right next to it. Like, and so why don't you just load up the printer? That's not my job. I'm like, really? It's not your job? So that kind of clinched it for me that like, okay, I'm kind of done. I'm kind of done with this right now. I want to go do something else. And so I started looking at returning into the military, but I didn't want to like walk around and do like heavy stuff, like carrying heavy backpacks, carrying guns. It's terrible. So what's the furthest thing away from it? Helicopters. Like helicopters is amazing. And so initially, like I wanted to be like a mechanic crew chief on it, but when I started looking at the requirements for it, for the pilots, I was like, I could do this. Like it was extremely arrogant of me, like 100%. Like if I had known anything about like flight school, the journey, the packet, all of this stuff, like I would not have had the same opinion. Like if I knew now, if I knew then what I know now about it, like I might not have even tried, except that like I know the end result. But like I was just extremely arrogant in the like, oh yeah, I could definitely do that. Like I've got this. And so like I marched in a couple days later to the recruiter. Now mind you, like when I got out of the Marines, I didn't keep exercising like I did in the Marines. And so like I really packed it on. And so I had between that point and then when I actually entered the Army, I dropped almost 90 pounds. And so, but I walked into the recruiter's office, you know, just ginormous. And I'm like, I want to do this. And he's looking at me like, yeah, okay, dude. Like, you can't even like walk 2 laps around the track without being gassed. Like, how are you going to do all of this? I'm like, I'll do it. And so it was a long process. And so I started going to the gym, working out and doing this stuff. And I decided that that's what I really wanted to do. And so between that and then like a whole bunch of people having like lapses in judgment, letting me in, that, you know, that's how I got in to become a helicopter pilot.
Wow. And so what is the process? You're saying there's a lot of stuff you got to go through. What exactly schools do you have to go to? And also, I want to know, because you're going from Marines to Army, do they do any in-doc or what's that like?
All right, so the in-doc first. I didn't know whether I was going to have to go to like Army boot camp or whatever. They laughed at me and they're like, no, you're not going to Army boot camp. We don't want your bad habits. We don't want any of this nonsense. Like so I went from being Joe Civilian on the street, like literally one day being Joe Civilian on the street, to showing up to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and being handed an Army uniform and expected to like operate as like a warrant officer cadet. And I'm just like, like what's going on here? So the process, though, there's a lot of written tests, a lot of physicals, and so some big things are that you have to be able to like manipulate like geospatial objects in your brain. You've got to have like really good depth perception, your physical, like just perfect hearing, perfect eyesight, like reflexes. They've got these tests that I guess like 95% of people can't pass the test. It's this arc reflective dot thing that you stare at it and you have to be able to tell like which one is off. And like most people can get through, there's like 1 through 10, and most people can get through 5, but you have to be able to complete like 8 of them successfully. And so there's that. So there's all the physical paperwork. The process is meant to be a long process. Like, so the application packet is designed to be like a 10 to 12 month process, because part of it is they want to make sure that you're serious about going in there, because you hear all kinds of different figures, but the lowball figure for what the Army spends on you in flight school is north of $1 million. And so they want to make sure that you're actually going to be capable of passing the test. And so they've got tests, like, I don't even know what the point of them is. Like, they'll give you questions like, which do you prefer, George Washington or Abraham Lincoln? And you have to circle one. And it's like, and they're like, oh, there's no wrong answer to it. Well, but you're grading me on this, so there has to be a wrong answer. And so there's a lot of tests like that. But then once you get into school, flight school is kind of an umbrella hodgepodge of schools. And so you start off, if you go the warrant officer track, you start off with having to become commissioned as a warrant officer. So there's, for some people, I think it's a 9-week school. You go through the school and essentially like they teach you all the Army regulations and stuff like that about how to become a warrant officer, how to be a warrant officer. And so then once you get through that, then you start going to stuff like SEER training and a lot of other like little nonsense schools before you actually get into flight training. And then once you're in flight training, you need to learn how to fly a helicopter. And so one would think that you go to a simulator and you start off day one, you get in a helicopter. This guy, like, it's probably a Vietnam vet, old crusty dude, picks you up to like a 3 or 4 foot hover, like hovering this thing. And of course, well, so the first day they give you like a little joyride and let you fly it. And so this guy lets me fly it like, well, we're in cruise flight. We're straight and level, gives me the controls. And I'm making the helicopter move around. I'm like, all right, this isn't so bad. And so day 2, he picks this thing up to a hover, and now the helicopter is holding perfectly still. It should be easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not easy. Hovering is like the hardest thing that you can do because you have to control the up and down axis, the back and forth axis, the side to side axis, and then the twisting axis all at the same time.
Wow. You got to be really steady.
Yeah, you've got to coordinate like 2 hands and then your feet to make all of this stuff happen. So he gives me the controls, and we literally start doing like loops. And I mean, this is all part of like the normal process, but just like back and forth and up and down. And, eventually, obviously, I learned how to fly a helicopter. But you do that, and then like several months later, you get to whatever aircraft that you're going to ultimately fly. And I was fortunate to get a Blackhawk. That's what I wanted. When like one of my first weeks in Fort Rucker, I had been driving around, and I come over this hill and I see this Blackhawk hovering, and it's literally the first time that like I'd ever been in love with a machine. And I was like, that is the most gorgeous thing that I've ever seen in my life. I want, obviously, except my wife, you're amazing, babe. With the helicopter, seriously, it was amazing. And so I was like, I want to fly that. Well, it's not always up to you. It's whatever the Army needs you to fly. And so I was very fortunate that I got to fly what I wanted to fly.
And does it go off? Is there any sort of ranking system? Is that what everybody kind of goes in wanting to fly, or is there other preferences? People, they're kind of all over. Okay.
So yes, there is a ranking system. No, everybody does not want to fly a Blackhawk, and no, everybody does not get their preferences. And so this entire flight school is like a 1.5 years long. So literally everything that you do, from like your PT test to your academic test, all of this is all stacked up in this big metric, and you're ranked. And just to give you the idea of competition, most of the class had a 96 or higher average. And so the spread of like 50 guys is within that 4-point bracket of between 100% and a 96% average. And so like it's extremely competitive, like very cutthroat for a lot of this. And so then they rank you up and they give you, and so the first guy on the list gets his preference. And so it all depends on like what you want. There are a lot of guys that they're like, oh, we want to fly Apaches, we want to fly guns, like go shoot stuff. And other guys, like, they want to fly the big Chinooks. Like those things are amazing. They've got power for days. Like they're just a lot of fun. Blackhawks are the most common airframe, and so statistically that's probably what you're going to get. And then while I was in flight school, they had the Kiowas, but the Kiowa has been discontinued and it's no longer flown anymore. And so really there's 3 helicopter options, and then the Army also has like fixed wing, like jets that they fly around. They're like passenger jets. And so that's another option that you can do, like, but those are again for people that are really smart, because everybody wants to learn how to fly like the fixed wing.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I was more familiar with Army aircraft, but I can picture it all.
Yeah.
So what would you say was like throughout this training? What was your hardest day to get through?
Whew. Hmm. It's a good question. Um, my hardest day was probably in SEER school, and so without like divulging anything about it, the instructors have so the object is so they pick out the vulnerable populations, and so I had some very good um, women soldiers friends that I was there with, and like a couple of them like they got it pretty hard, and like so that was hard because like there was nothing that we could do for them, like, and like so you're physically drained, you're tired, and then you've got like all of this like quite literally being held in captivity, and then you've got like just the emotional like here is somebody that like it's not fair that they're getting picked on. It's not fair that they've got all of this stuff going on, and so that was hard, and that wasn't. It was one of those things where it's training, but you
Mm-hmm.
still want to like go punch the guy in the face, and
Yeah.
so that was definitely a hard day.
I could picture that really messing with you because even though it's training,
Yeah,
your brain doesn't and your body doesn't, so you're still reacting to all of that.
yeah.
That's intense. That's very intense. Another thing I wanted to ask about was kind of the cultural differences
Mm.
between maybe even like leadership in the Marine Corps versus leadership in the Army.
Yeah, so lots of difference. So if you were to enter the Marines from a different branch, you would never hear the end of it. Like we had guys that entered the Marines like from the Air Force and from the Army, and they were constantly like heckled for coming from like an inferior service and all of this
Of
stuff.
course.
I expected this going into the Army. Literally nobody cared.
Wow.
They're like, oh, you're in the Marines. Great. So are those two other guys over there. Like, you're not in the Marines anymore. Like. And
Mm-hmm.
so, okay. Like, and by the end of my service, like, I served more time in the Army than I did in the Marines. But the other thing was the Marine culture, at least in the infantry, was very much based on like a culture of running. So if you were a good runner, then you ranked higher in like the social pecking order. But if you're not such a good runner, well, maybe and you could be brilliant at like whatever job you were, but it wasn't like always job-based proficiency. It was like, are you good at running? And it's like, well, how fast I do 3 miles in the Marines really has no bearing on like my personality, my leadership, anything like that. Whereas the Army, and so what I experienced, like I said, I was a warrant officer, and so that was a little bit different dynamic because I had a bit more freedom and flexibility, especially as I moved up in the seniority to get that kind of stuff done. But there was a lot more trust and knowledge-based proficiency. Like I had multiple instances where I would be sitting in like a mission briefing, and literally everybody at the table outranked CW2 Tanderum, or sorry, Scott. Um, but yes, I write under a pen name. Surprise. Um, so everybody outranked me. But as soon as I would have generals that would tell a colonel, like, listen, chief over here is talking, like, you need to stop because, like, he knows a lot more about, like, everything about this than you have. Like, and, like, it was a constant, like, deferring to the warrant officers. I had a 3-star general come walking up to myself and my co-pilot, who was a captain, on a 2-bar captain, an Army captain, instead of a Navy captain.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he comes walking up, and I'm standing right there next to like a guy that clearly outranks me. And he starts talking to me because he assumes that I'm in charge of the aircraft. Because the culture is that the warrant officers are the pilots in command, and they're in charge of the aircraft. In that case, yes, I happen to be the pilot in command. He didn't know that, but it was just that it was interesting because it's that assumption of like, okay, you may not hold the highest rank, or you may not be the fastest runner, but we recognize your expertise in this subject.
And there's so much value in that because you're relying on the people, the subject matter experts, instead of just the person with the highest rank. And
Exactly.
That's going to get so much farther.
Yeah.
And that kind of just thinking about how each branch promotes so differently, even within their own kind of subculture. Yeah, that just creates, more growth for the whole organization.
Yeah.
So you did 7 years in the Army, or?
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember. I have to go back and count on my fingers, and it gets a little dicey.
Yeah. So when was the point where you're like, all right, I've had enough, I'm ready to do something else?
So the point was I had a point in time where I had vertigo. Like I got just a severe case of vertigo, and like quite understandably, like the Army doesn't want you flying helicopters when you can't position yourself in geographic space, and so that put me down, and I wasn't able to fly anymore. So after that point in time, like I stayed on for a bit, like helping the unit and doing stuff, but after that point, like it really wasn't fun anymore. It was like, why am I doing this? Like I can't fly. I have no future of flying anymore. So why do this? And so it was one of those things where that's where I was ready to leave, but if I could still fly, I would literally still be there right now. Yeah.
Yeah, you loved it. You really loved it. So what causes vertigo? Or, how does that work? I'm just curious.
So it's a problem in the inner ear. Like it's crazy like what your ears do. Like the role that your ears actually play in your balance and like how you perceive things. Because like if you're flying, I don't know if you ever got to fly in a helicopter, but when you're flying along, you can even do this in a car. So if you have a long gradual turn where you're in a left turn, right turn, whatever it is, and then you level back off, well, the fluid in your ear has settled and is normalized to being in that left turn. And so it now perceives that as being level, like level. And so then when you level back off, it says, your body says, no, I'm in a turn now. And so you seek to return yourself back to that turn to correct the fluid in your ear. It passes after like a minute or two, but it's an illusion on your body. And so like a lot of times you can't like trust what your body is saying. And so like your flight instruments, you have to trust those because the flight instruments are right and your body is lying to you.
That is so frustrating because
you're
trying to rely on that.
Mm-hmm.
So one more question from your time as a pilot. What was like one of your most memorable days or memorable missions?
So I was in Hawaii, which was a lot of fun, but there was this infantry unit that was out in the field, and it had been raining pretty hard, and there was I think it was a typhoon that was coming in. It was a huge storm. Well, the roads had washed out, so like they literally can't get out of this training area. And the storm is going to be bad enough where like people have the potential to be like injured or killed if they can't get out of the field. And so we flew, like it was just low clouds, low visibility, like getting in was like interesting. And so just coming in there and landing, and it was it was a pretty it was a pretty dicey flight. And so making multiple trips of getting in there and getting these guys was pretty memorable. And especially like the look of gratitude on their face, because like you land and you look back and you see them just like slump back in their chair, because in their brain they're like, okay, I'm on the helicopter, I'm safe.
Yeah.
Little do they know, like, I'm still up here on the controls, and you're actually not safe. You're actually about to embark on like one of the more dangerous parts, because we've got to get out of here. And so like, you know, rain's coming down, we're dodging in and out of clouds, like to get back to the air base. And so, but we got them all out. And so that was something it was a pretty memorable time.
Yeah, and what's kind of like the crew like on the aircraft? How many people are like kind of helping you? Or
so there's two pilots and two crew chiefs, and the crew chiefs are enlisted. The crew chiefs are amazing. Like they're the best thing ever. If I had to like either fly the aircraft by myself and have two crew chiefs, or have no crew chiefs and the other pilot, I'd rather fly by myself with two crew chiefs.
wow.
Like because so they provide like amazing situational awareness. So they can see out the side of the helicopter, and so they're telling you like what's happening with your tail, like up, down, like if you're clear, if you're coming, you know, they've got all the obstacles. So it's like you've got eyes completely around the helicopter because they can see everything. And so a good crew chief will enable you to do things that other pilot cannot. And so I had a time where I was landing, and I told the crew chief, I was like, all right, bring us in, like, you've got this. And so he starts doing what he's supposed to do, and we're landing on this pad. The visibility had gone kind of bad, but he could see out the side. Well, so he starts calling me in, giving me, and literally all I'm doing is I'm just making the controls of what he's telling me to do. And so land down there, perfect landing. He looks up front and realizes that my front windscreen is completely fogged out. Like I cannot see out the front of this aircraft to save my life. And he's like, oh, whoa, you actually couldn't see, sir. I'm like, no, I told you I couldn't see. But it's that trust in the crew chief. So if you have a good crew chief, he'll bring you down and save your life. And that will 100% save your life. But the crew chiefs are amazing, and it's a relationship that like anybody outside of aviation, it bugs a lot of like infantry guys and a lot of like ground people, because they view our relationship as fraternization, but because they're more familiar with me than what's traditional. But it's not, because we need a good crew mix. And so if you have somebody that's scared to say something because they're all wrapped up in protocols and SIRS and things like that, well, there's a possibility that you can die because he's hesitant to challenge the SIR on board. But I mean, there are definitely lines and there are definitely things that like, okay, no, we're not doing this together, or like, you don't get to talk to me like that, and all of that. Like, you're not my best friend at work. But it's a lot more fluid than a traditional relationship.
Yeah, that is definitely probably one of the more I don't know, like intimate jobs where you're working with an officer and the enlisted, and you have to have that kind of trust, that relationship, and that takes that. Wow, we're already at 9:30. I have a lot of questions. Okay, I just wanted to know, how did your first separation help with your second, or what was your second like?
Yeah. So the first separation, I did everything completely wrong, like 100%. Like I didn't understand my benefits. I didn't understand like anything. So I got myself into a lot of trouble with that, the aforementioned college, because the college didn't know, and they didn't really know anything about like the GI Bill, and so they pressured me into taking like a loan, like for my for the student loan bills, and instead of like just waiting the extra 3 weeks, like for the GI Bill to start kicking in. And so like there was a lot of like that kind of stuff where like, yeah, I didn't do it right, and I didn't really have anybody to help me, because it was just kind of like one of those like get out and figure it out. And, like, what am I doing? Like, the world is wild and crazy now. I'm like, where do I go? What do I do? Whereas like when I got out the second time, one, there were a lot more resources, there was a lot more structure, but I also had a better idea of what I was expecting. And so I had a better plan. I knew where I was going and kind of what I wanted to do. So it was an easier transition.
Yes, definitely, because you had already made those mistakes, and you're like, I know not where to go, I know who to trust. And what was your relationship with the VA the second time?
So a lot of people, I see a lot of people that have like issues and problems with the VA. I hear those, but that hasn't been my experience right now. Like, my experience with the VA, at least this time around, has been very good. It's been very positive. They've been like, it's kind of embarrassing. Like, they've been exceptionally fast on like when I put in like a disability claim. Like, they processed that. Like, it was done in like 3 months. And
wow, that is quick.
yeah, and so it was one of those things where they'd expected like a 7-month turnaround, and they were done in like 3 months. Like, it might have even been less, but it was ridiculous because, and again, like it kind of embarrassing. Like, okay, like I hear that you're having all these problems, but like this, and so what I wish is that my experience with the VA was everybody's experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, it kills me that, because and it hasn't always been perfect, but I've gotten to experience the VA at what they should be. And it's been a blessing. It's been a big blessing, and just all the things that I've needed to do with them. And they've been very like punctual, like calling me back, like doing all of just the little proactive stuff. And yeah, it's been.
No, I like to hear stories like that. I mean, it's good to hear positivity. So now I want to talk about your book and kind of being an author. So I thought, when I was listening to your book, I loved the character development. I loved the background. And I was kind of wondering, because you're kind of juggling a few different characters. How do you, like, do you have like a picture of them with like all their characteristics, or how does that separate in your brain?
No, I don't have a picture of them. I base the characters, not exclusively, but I have bits and pieces of the characters that are composites of like different people that I know. And so, and that book was my second go around at trying to write a book. Like, the first one was really bad, and like it'll never see the light of day ever. It was just like, it received all sorts of like horrible critiques, and it was stuff that I got mad about, but I learned from. But no, the characters, I want, like, when you're experiencing a viewpoint of like a Puerto Rican woman, I want who appears in the story. Like, yes, I want you to believe that it's a Puerto Rican woman speaking. I don't want you to hear David Scott. I don't want you to hear the white male that's actually writing. I want you to believe that, and to hear a Puerto Rican woman. And so, like, I've done a lot of like listening to people's stories, like talking with people, trying to like get viewpoints that are other than my own, because like all of these character stories are not necessarily my own. Like, their thoughts, their opinions, and stuff like that. Like, is not necessarily the way that I see the world. And so I want to give them their own voice. And so, yeah, I have an idea in my brain of what somebody looks like. And so you mentioned Marissa, like she was actually supposed to be a throwaway character. And
Really? She was one of my
yeah,
favorites. Probably my
yeah, mine too. But she was supposed to be there. So there was a Japanese Yakuza enforcer that was supposed to go away. And that was her job, was she was going to come in, take him out, and that was part of the plot device. When I started writing her story, I didn't even think that I had enough to get through like half a chapter. I was like, ooh, I don't really know anything about her. And then I started like diving in and writing them, like digging and expanding and like, who is this person? And so, yeah, like she kind of took over, and like she's one of my favorite to write.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, she, as a reader, I was rooting for her. Like, she's the one that I want to. I mean, even the others. So I also wanted to know, because there's no shortage of action scenes, how do you paint that picture in your reader's mind by choosing what to write? Do you do you reenact them, or maybe watch a scene?
Yeah, I stand up, like I stand up and get my hat on and like dance. No, I'm kidding. No, but so what I will do though is sometimes, so for the first scene in the book, it's a raid sequence, and so that like I'll actually find a picture of where, so most of the places that appear in this book, like there's a corresponding location on Earth. Even if I made up part of it, like if there's a house described, if there's something like that, there is a real location that looks like this place. And so I'll use that picture and then start like basically drawing out the scene of what happens. Okay, so how are the helicopters coming in? One's going to swing around here. One's going to swing around here. What are the positions of my characters? Okay, so the guy that I'm following, he's going to be on this aircraft. Where is this aircraft? It's over here. And so really following the scene of like what are they doing? But then like for a fight scene, I'm trying to visualize like one, what is my character's capabilities? Because they're not all the same. Like they're not all like Black Widow, super ninja, like do stuff. They've each got like different ways of solving problems. And so like how would whatever solve a problem? And so then yeah, I'll go through the sequence in my head of, okay, so if I do this and I kick this leg, what is this guy going to do? Like, what is he likely to do? How is he going to try to counter this? Okay, so now this creates this problem. And that's kind of how I write the sequence out, is imagining like what the characters are doing and then try to polish it up a little bit more after that.
That is really cool. I feel like we just kind of got like behind the scenes of how you write it out. That was awesome. So we are coming up on time. So I was wondering, is there anything you could tease about the sequel? Are you calling it the next book?
Sure. Yeah. So you are going to see the main characters that you follow. So Marissa, Naomi, Isaac, you're going to see them again in the next book. The next book resumes where the other one leaves off. Kind of, it's about a 2-3 week gap in between the two. So it picks up where it is, and there are some things at the end of the book that happen that like at the very, very end of the book.
Yeah.
That I've gotten a lot of like angry letters about, of like, you know, so that gets addressed. Like that gets addressed very much in detail. But yeah, so what it is the story is is Isaac finding out that one of his friends is still alive. However, the CIA, NSA says, no, that video is not real. The proof of life video, it's actually a deep fake. And so then he has to grapple with like, okay, is it real? Is it not real? But meanwhile, you've got eco-terrorists that are like, so you've got this whole web of like eco-terrorists that want to like take the earth back to like the Stone Age. And so Isaac gets caught up in the middle of like this web trying to find out like, where is my old teammate at? And so that's where the book is.
Yeah, there's a lot of loose ends that hopefully get tied up or maybe just get more tangled.
Maybe get more tangled, yeah. Yeah, I can't promise anything there.
Yeah,
But
that's exciting. So where can people find your books and maybe get in touch with you?
yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm at David Scott Books. And my books, my book, I've got a short story out as well, but you can buy them literally anywhere online. So you go to an online store and search for it. Most local bookstores are going to be able to fill it too. So like if you're a fan of shopping local at your local bookstore, go there, ask them to order Titan Protocol.
There it is.
And they will be able to fill that order.
Awesome. Definitely check it out, guys. I got to listen to the audiobook and it's exciting. You'll want to listen to it in 1 or 2 days. Just binge it. Well, Dave, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for everyone who joined the live and stopped by. I hope you have a great week and have a great rest of your night.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a good night.
Bye.